Anthony Joshua scores the win over Dominic Breazeale with a 7th round KO. He wins all 7 rounds, or, wins all 6 rounds and knocks him out in the 7th, with 2 knockdowns scored in the 7th. Breazeale, I must admit, did a lot better than I expected. If you watch the podcast that we do on Wednesday, I said that I thought Breazeale would probably be out of there in 1 or 2 rounds. And, I was surprised by the durability and the heart zone by Dominic Breazeale. A lot of credit needs to go for him, just for his toughness in there, really. I looked at that Amir Mansour fight and thought he'd be the kind of guy who wouldn't last very long at all against an operator like Anthony Joshua. But he did better than anticipated. I think the problem for Breazeale is 4 or 5 rounds in, he was doing a decent job of covering up, but remaining a bit of a punch bag. In the 6th round, in the 7th round, you saw him trying to get off a bit of offence of his own. He was trying to catch Joshua to the body. He was trying to throw a bit more. And I think as he's decided to engage, having been softened up by numerous shots from Joshua, he became slower, his reaction started to dumb, and he just was able to get caught by Joshua more and more easily. Joshua looked like he had the power early on to hurt Breazeale, but Breazeale, showed a bit of grit in staying in of the fight. I would say that Joshua was fairly dominant and pretty much won every minute of every round, and credit to him for that. But Breazeale, I guess, was a different test to Joshua, being the fact that he was a much bigger guy. And I think this is the first time Anthony Joshua's fought someone who's actually bigger than him, other than Gary Cornish. And, that fight ended so swiftly that Joshua probably didn't learn anything from it. Now, Breazeale himself in there was painfully slow. And I think the difference in speed and athleticism between the two was so evident. I mean, Breazeale's footwork was pretty horrendous, so slow, so plodding. And his jab, I said in the podcast, he threw a jab like pushing it out through treacle. And, that was very, very obvious there. I don't really think he was able to land very many jabs on Anthony Joshua because his jab was so slow, and, the sort of cross that came off his jab was so telegraphed. Joshua was almost able to take a step back and get out of the way. It was a very dominant performance from Anthony Joshua. And I got to give him some credit here. I didn't rate Dominic Breazeale going into this fight. I didn't think Breazeale, had very much to bother Joshua with. But nevertheless, Joshua's gone 7 rounds, which I think that's the only time other than the Dillian Whyte fight he's been beyond 4 rounds. He's won every round. He's looked defensively solid. He hasn't really had to take very much. And he's basically bludgeoned Dominic Breazeale and stopped him. So credit goes to Anthony Joshua. You'd have to say that Joshua's problems will come against the guy who could fight on the inside, against the guy who can put him on his back foot, against the guy who can establish a jab against him, against the guy who can move around the ring athletically and slip shots, against the guy who can stay out of range. And unfortunately, Dominic Breazeale was so slow and so unathletic, he didn't really have any of those to bring to the table. And you'd certainly hope, in the interest of competitiveness and in the interest of entertaining fights, going forward Joshua will take a slight step up from the Dominic Breazeales of this world, because the gap between the two is so vast, and it never really looked like Breazeale had anything of troubling Joshua. It never looked like he could outbox him, never really looked like he could hurt him. So Joshua goes on from this, as I say, a solid performance, a credible performance, albeit against an opponent at a certain level. Breazeale did better than I expected. As I say, I thought it was a 1 or 2 round job, but Breazeale raised his game for the world title shot. He performed with some credit, and even though it wasn't the most competitive fight, it was still an interesting one, and I guess still kept me entertained for the 7 rounds of which it ensued. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Do leave your comments below. Were you impressed by Joshua? Were you impressed by Breazeale? Who would you like to see either man fight next? How does Joshua do against the big guns of this world, the Furies, the Klitschko's, the David Hayes, the Joseph Parkers? Let me know your thoughts below. If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, please click the thumbs up and like this video. Thanks, guys.